Imagine being told you're not Filipino enough by people from your own motherland. Now, this is a debate that's been going around, sparking heated discussions all over social media. Are Filipino Americans really Filipinos? Are Filipinos born and raised abroad truly Filipino? And if they are they Filipino enough? But what if I told you that being Filipino goes beyond just the place where you were born or where you live? Mabuhay or in Kapampangan, luwid kayo. Welcome to my channel. It's me, Kirby, your friendly Pinoy historian. On our last video, we talked about the origins of the term Pinoy. And today, we're diving deeper into what makes someone Filipino, especially for those living outside the Philippines. Okay, so before we dive in, let us acknowledge one key fact. The name Filipino comes from a Spanish king, but we won't get into all the complicated details about this today because that's a topic for another video another day. Today, we're focusing on what it means to be Filipino and how that identity has shifted over time. So are Filipino Americans really Filipinos? Instead of taking sides in this debate, let us explore why this question even exists. Because the Philippines is incredibly diverse, with over 7,000 islands and numerous ethnicities, languages, and indigenous cultures. For example, the Kapampangans are known for their rich culinary traditions and distinct language, while the Cebuanos celebrate their heritage and traditions through colorful festivals like the world-famous Sinulog. And on the other hand, the Lumads in Mindanao maintain unique spiritual practices tied to their ancestral lands, and each group in the Philippines contributes to the broader understanding of what it means to be Filipino. So, what does this diversity mean for someone who identifies as Filipino, especially for the millions of Filipinos who live abroad? For Filipino Americans who might not speak their parents' languages or practice the same customs, this question becomes, what truly makes someone Filipino? Now, both sides of this argument, those in the Philippines and abroad, bring something valuable to the table, to this conversation about identity. So to understand why this question even persists, we need to look further back in history. Filipinos have a deep-rooted history in America. In 1587, Luzones Indios were the first historically recorded Asians to set foot in what is now the United States, landing in Morro Bay, California. Later in the 1700s, Filipinos known as the Manila Men established St. Malo in Louisiana, marking Filipinos as the oldest continuous Asian American community in North America. Now these pioneers faced challenges and struggles, but they laid the groundwork for future generations. Indeed, during the period when both the Philippines and Mexico were Spanish colonies, Filipinos played a key role in the Manila Galleon trade between Manila and Acapulco in Mexico, which connected Asia and the Americas. Many Filipinos traveled to what is now Mexico, which during this time included California and even Texas. This early movement between the Philippines and the Americas helped shape future Filipino migration patterns, including those to what is now the United States. Now moving forward to the early 1900s, in the aftermath of the bloody Philippine-American War, a larger wave of Filipinos known as the Manongs migrated to the US, particularly to Hawaii and California. Though technically US nationals under American colonial rule, they faced racism, discrimination, and exploitation. These early migrants built strong communities, which later became the foundations of the Filipino American identity. Indeed, the Manongs led multi-ethnic solidarity efforts and played pivotal roles in the civil rights movement, leaving a lasting impact on social justice in the US. And you can learn more about this in my older videos, so make sure to check them out after this video. Now, from the very beginning, Filipino Americans were navigating two worlds. They worked hard to maintain their Filipino heritage while adapting to the life in the US, which inevitably changed their cultural practices. These early generations were already redefining what it meant to be Filipino, blending traditions from home with their new life in America. And if you think about it, the Filipino American experience offers us both strengths like adaptability, resilience, and cultural preservation, along with challenges such as navigating cultural differences and facing discrimination. So, what does it mean to be Filipino? The short answer is, it's complicated. For many in the Philippines, being Filipino is tied to language, food, and traditions. But what about those who grew up outside the Philippines? For Filipino Americans, being Filipino may not be about speaking Tagalog fluently or practicing traditional customs like they do in the motherland. Instead, it may be about preserving and keeping their heritage alive in a way that fits their unique reality. And let us be honest, whether you're in the Philippines or across the diaspora, not everyone feels the same level of connection to their roots. And that is perfectly okay. That is fine, because each and every one of us, we have our own journey, shaped by where we grew up, by our family dynamics, and the choices we make. What is important is recognizing that Filipino identity is diverse, whether you're deeply connected to your heritage or navigating it in your own way. Now, growing up both in the motherland in the Philippines and in the US, I often find myself navigating the deep, sometimes challenging, diverse cultural waters, constantly balancing the values and traditions of both worlds. And this journey of understanding what it truly means to be Filipino has shaped not just my identity, but my view of our shared collective story. And one thing has become clear: our Filipino identity is shaped by a vast and diverse mix of cultures, traditions, and languages. Because again, the Philippines is home to more than 180 languages and numerous ethnic groups, including Kapampangans, Tagalog, Cebuanos, Ilocanos, Maranaos, Magindanaoans, Warais, the indigenous Aitas, Lumads, Tausug, Samabadjao, Igorot, and many more. And everyone contributes to the colorful diversity of what it means to be Filipino today. So, before we start debating who is more Filipino, maybe we should start reflecting on and recognizing our diverse roots, from our indigenous people to our Muslim communities and beyond. Because the Filipino identity is not just about a single narrative, it is about embracing the richness of our roots. After all, the strength of being Filipino lies in our diversity. Now, interestingly, the idea of what it means to be Filipino has been evolving for centuries. Unknown to many, originally the term Filipino only referred to the Spaniards born in the Philippines, not the native or indigenous people. It was not until the 1800s that the Filipino nationalists like Jose Rizal and Andres Bonifacio began to reclaim the term Filipino, using Filipino as a unifying identity for all the people in the archipelago, regardless of ethnic background. If our people redefined and reclaimed what it means to be Filipino back then, how has it changed today? And how should we understand it now, especially for the millions of Filipinos living abroad? Just as the term was once reclaimed and redefined by our Bayanis, today, Filipino Americans are redefining, reclaiming, and reshaping what it means to be Filipino to fit their own lived realities in the diaspora. This evolution shows us that the Filipino identity has never been fixed, has never been rigid or singular. In fact, just as the Philippines has multiple ethnic groups, individuals can hold multiple identities. For example, I identify as Kapampangan, Tagalog, Filipino, Pinoy, and Filipino American, and one identity does not make the others any less significant. These layers of identity can coexist, and in fact, they do coexist for the vast majority of our people, enriching what it truly means to be Filipino. And recognizing these layers deepens our understanding of ourselves and our collective identity. So with all this diversity, how do we define what it means to be Filipino? Can one definition fit everyone? Or is it about embracing the differences? And maybe it's not about who is right or wrong, but about seeing the value in different perspectives. Because in reality, being Filipino is colorful, layered, and constantly evolving. In today's world of social media, discussions around being truly Filipino often sparks heated debates on platforms like Twitter, TikTok, Facebook, and Reddit. Some Filipinos in the motherland might feel that Filipino Americans are too far removed from their roots, perhaps not speaking the language fluently, or not even cooking adobo correctly. On the flip side, Filipino Americans may feel alienated or judged for not being considered Filipino enough, even though they work hard to honor their heritage while navigating life in another country. And this back and forth can lead to cultural gatekeeping, where both sides attempt to define what it really means to be Filipino. However, it is important for us to acknowledge that cultural adaptation happens on both sides. So, does one side have the right to judge the other? Or should we be finding ways to unite despite our differences? And how do we honor both the old traditions and new realities? Okay, now let's be honest. We have to admit that while some Filipino Americans might be seen as too westernized, the same can be said about some Filipinos in the motherland, where globalization and modern influences have shifted cultural practices in everyday life. So whether you're in the Philippines or in the US, exposure to Western media, technology, and lifestyle has inevitably shaped aspects of how we live. But this does not diminish anyone's Filipino identity. Rather, it reflects how cultures naturally evolve in a globalized world. So rather than seeing these differences as a source of conflict, it is important for us to recognize that being Filipino is not monolithic. It is shaped by the unique challenges and experiences of those who live in different places. So both Filipino Americans and Filipinos in the motherland are navigating ways of blending the old with the new. while staying connected to our traditions passed down through generations. No matter where you are, these efforts reflect the evolving and resilient nature of being Filipino. So the question is not about who is more Filipino, but it's about how these diverse experiences contribute to a global Filipino identity which continues to adapt in the globalized world. Despite differences, Filipinos in the Philippines and Filipino Americans share a deep connection through both history, struggles, and tangible actions. Whether it's Filipinos in the motherland dealing with the legacies of colonialism or Filipino Americans facing racial discrimination in the US, these challenges have shaped being Filipino across the world. And what is inspiring is how Filipino Americans, especially the youth, have come together throughout history to reconnect with their heritage while supporting communities back in the Philippines. Organizations like NAFCON organize annual medical missions to underserved areas in the Philippines. In fact, during Typhoon Haiyan or Typhoon Yolanda in 2013, many FAHM youth, including myself, mobilized to raise millions of dollars for relief and rebuilding efforts to help our kababayans back at home. And this shows us that being Filipino is not just about celebrating our identity. It's not just about representation, but also about taking action and uniting to support one another in times of need, no matter where we are. And unknown to many in the motherland, events like Filipino Cultural Nights or PCNs and PYCs or Filipino Youth Conferences, organized and led by FAHM youth in American schools, further foster cultural exchange and community building. And these are just some examples of the ones that I've witnessed and been a part of. Whether through medical aid, financial relief, or cultural exchange, these initiatives not only support our people back in the motherland, but also exemplify the Bayanihan spirit of our ancestors, the Bayanihan spirit of our people, showcasing our collective commitment to uplifting one another, our shared dedication to helping those in need, despite being thousands of miles away. Instead of asking, are Filipino Americans really Filipinos? Or are Filipinos born and raised abroad Filipino enough? Maybe we should be asking, how has the Filipino identity evolved in the Philippines and outside the motherland? Identity, especially being Filipino, is far more complex than a simple label. Filipino Americans are not less Filipino just because they've adapted to life in the US. In fact, they've taken core Filipino values like family, community, resilience, and the Bayanihan spirit and adapted them to fit their unique reality. In doing so, they're expanding what it means to be Filipino. So instead of seeing Filipino Americans or Filipinos in the diaspora as less Filipino, it is time to recognize that their experiences add to the richness of the Filipino identity. And if we think about it, the Philippines has never been isolated, and our people's cultures have always been shaped by outside influences, whether from our neighboring Asian countries, from Spain or the US. Filipino Americans are part of that ongoing story of adaptation and change. And both sides, whether in the Philippines or abroad, offer something special, offer something valuable to our shared Filipino community. The real challenge is finding a way to appreciate these differences while still recognizing the many things we have in common. In recent years, we've seen exciting collaborations between Filipino Americans and Filipinos in the Philippines, like the joint efforts of Filipino filmmakers, artists, and musicians to support one another and to celebrate Filipino culture globally. One example of this is the work of my friends at the Filipino Story. Their team is actually made up of both Filipinos in the Philippines and Filipino Americans, and together they've created engaging content that highlights our shared values, history, and culture. And I've had the pleasure of working with them on a project recently, and I'm excited to continue exploring more collaborations like this in the future, because through collaborations like this, we can celebrate the diversity of the Filipino experience while finding ways to connect and understand each other, whether we live in the Philippines or abroad. Because whether we like it or not, the future of being Filipino is global, embracing the rich tapestry of our roots along with our interwoven experiences from all across the globe. At the heart of it all, being Filipino is not about fitting into a box or conforming into a single definition. Whether we're preserving traditions in the Philippines or adapting them in the US or anywhere else in the world, these paths reflect the strength of our identity, our shared history, shared values like Bayanihan, and our unbreakable bond with our roots unite us across the world. And this only makes us stronger, And to be honest, that is a big part of the reason why I started and created this channel 12 years ago. I believe that reconnecting with our roots and exploring our shared history will help us better understand who we are. In this age of social media, instead of pulling each other apart, why not harness technology to build deeper connections and uplift one another? Because at the end of the day, isn't it better to understand and celebrate the inherent strength, the incredible resilience, and the vibrant diversity of being Filipino? So when someone asks, are Filipino Americans really Filipinos? Or if someone is truly Filipino or Filipino enough, maybe we should stop and reflect on a more important question, a better question. How can we be better Filipinos for our motherland and for our people around the world, no matter where we are? Because let's be honest, being Filipino is not just about the place where you were born or the place where you were raised. It's not just about the language you speak or the food you eat. If we look at our people's history, being Filipino is all about what's in your heart. It's all about staying connected and staying rooted. It's all about taking care of each other no matter where we are. Now I'd love to hear from you. How do you define and embrace being Filipino? How do you balance multiple identities? And how do you stay connected with your roots, with our roots? Share your stories in the comments below because we all have different stories, different experiences, and different journeys in life. But by learning from one another, by hearing each other's stories, and by understanding each other, we can deepen our understanding of what it truly means to be Filipino. And if you like this video and learned something new, don't forget to subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon, ring the bell icon, so you don't miss out on any of my upcoming videos about our people's history, culture, and everything in between. And if you would like to support my channel and my research, please consider being a patron on Patreon or a member of my YouTube channel. You can also support me by getting copies of any of my books, coloring books, ebooks, and merch, all about the fascinating history and cultures of the Philippines and Southeast Asia. Check out the links below. Your support truly means a lot to me and has helped this channel going for the past 12 years. Kaya naman maraming salamat po. O in Kapampangan dakal pong salamat kay Kongan and in Binisaya daghang salamat sa inyong tanan. See you next time mga Tagalog kita-kits and in Kapampangan. Mikitix in Bahasa Sug, Balikisab and in Binisaya, kita ay ta.